Hey, beautiful souls. I am so happy to welcome you back for another episode about her. And today we have the wonderful Patrizia with us. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time and I'm so looking forward to our conversation today. Before we jump in, I would love to ask you for a little introduction about you, to however much you feel like sharing right now.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Anna, and hello, everyone. So my name is Patrizia, and I am a mom to two beautiful boys. I am also a women's embodiment coach, and I work in the coaching space to help women access greater wholeness and well-being.
We so need at the time. And we've talked about that before we hit record, like the balancing of the, how to say, the authentic female self together with the entrepreneurship and the family. I think it's like, that's a task in itself. And so I'm, as much as we had already have the chance to chat about it, I think you're doing a wonderful job in like bringing this wholeness together. And it's really a needed role to be looked at, because I know from my clientele and also from my friends and myself, there are so many women who really struggle with balancing everything in a way that nothing is kind of like needed to be put in the bag so much. So I think it's actually kind of an art form to do so. And it's so great that you're offering your expertise to how you came there to others, because it's deeply needed, I think, in the shift that we're in right now.
I agree. And I love that you mentioned authenticity because I think it looks different for every person. And the beautiful thing is really giving ourselves permission to allow it to shift and to flow with wherever it is that we are in our life. So less rigidity and more fluidity in the sense that we get to decide what we prioritize, where we give our attention, and recognizing that there are different seasons to the things that we do. And there are times when we're called to be somewhere else versus, let's say, our businesses, and just choosing to own and decide what takes front seat, back seat, and really allowing ourselves to play with that and just trust that in following that it will all work out in exactly the way that it's meant to.
Hmm. I wish I would have heard that, no rigidity, but the fluidity, leaning into that. My Virgo mind structure would have loved to have heard that when I became a mother, like close to 7.5 years ago, because I was so rooted in my whole upbringing in this, like, I am that way or I want to be that way. It was like a very straight line that I was trying to follow, and this, like, being fluid in the way I do things or what I perceive as perfect or healthy or in that moment needed. My son really was breaking up that structure a lot, because before I was like, okay, that's the way I want to go. Not this is right for everyone, but that's right for me. And I need to stick to that. I need to be consequent. And when I said something, then I need to like stick to that. And motherhood really told me no, totally not the way to go there when you want to stay mentally healthy. So the fluidity, for me, it was really hard to embrace that and to give myself the permission almost to say like, okay, now in that phase, that's the way to lean in. And maybe there comes another phase like afterwards. My son is now transitioning out of like the first 7 years. So now it comes a time where he doesn't need me as much and I can be much more present for the business. But I've always tried to like be that and that at the same time. And it's like not working as easily as it looks from the outside. So I think it's really important that we give ourselves permission and that also we give others who we talk to this like insights of, you don't have to have it figured out, or you don't have to like be always in the same character trait that you have all the time, because sometimes we need this more flowy state of life.
And I mean, I'm a recovering perfectionist, so rigidity was part and parcel of who I was. I was taught at a very young age to be a high achiever, and I had very specific goals, and I met them all and surpassed them. And I had a very specific timeline and exactly how I wanted things to play out. And then, as the universe would have it, I was introduced to what I would say were invitations for growth. Other people may interpret them as challenges. I've done a lot of work around changing my mindset around, what came up for me in terms of health, and also just my journey to motherhood, which was a 7-year journey in which I held a vision for a family. And then also being a mom to 2 boys, both who are very sensitive souls, and one who has quite a complex profile in terms of being neurodiverse. And so all of that turned my understanding of life on its head, and for good, really, because it really forced me to look at the stories I had told myself about what it means to be successful, what it means to be fully present to what is in our life, what is right here for us right now, to also move out of that victim mentality and into truly that empowered state of recognizing that everything is here ultimately for us, and everything is a portal into greater expansion and more growth. And when I allowed myself to go there, then what I realized was that things were presenting themselves to me in ways because I stopped resisting it, right? There's that famous saying, what we resist persists. And, A Course in Miracles tells us when we engage with an energy from the place of attack, what we do is we hold that energy in place. And the dissolution of the energy comes with the acceptance and the surrender. And so it was really a huge personal journey that opened up a whole new level of faith and trust and belief, and just personal knowing that whatever was coming up for me was where I was being called to be. And I think as women, we sometimes box ourselves in or create impossible conditions for ourselves because we've heard women can have it all. But I would revise that and say we can have it all, but on our own terms. So that's going to look different, and it's going to be different in different chapters of our lives. And it doesn't always have to mean, we're working so hard to balance, whereas sometimes it's just knowing where we're being called and going there fully. It creates more space than if we try to juggle it all and hold it all, is when we're really in resistance or control. And that's when we feel out of control because we feel like we don't have it all together.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree on that. And I think the story you just shared is so beautiful because it's like, what a perfect picture for releasing control is kind of when your authentic self can emerge, instead of like what we've normally been raised with, like trying to have it all together, which is not the way the universe works, and which is also not bringing forth what actually our souls want to bring forth. But in like this embracing the quote unquote challenges that life gives us, especially with children, I think it can catapult us into a whole nother dimension on so many layers, is like to work with what's present there and lean in. I think that's part of like the embodiment that you so wonderfully like teach, is to like really lean into what is needed now and stop controlling to the extent of like having it all together. For me, there's always this picture of like all the threads that kind of like land. Yeah, that might be true for a mother. It's like kind of a fitting picture, but they don't have to have like the same pull all the time. Some may be let loose more, some are more tight. Like you don't have to have the perfect overview and the perfect solution for everything at the same time. And I think the moment we again go into the fluidity and the flow and the like leaning into what on a soul or heart level we feel called to, things just can open up. And what you shared, for me, it's like such a delightful experience to listen to, because these kids, you know, they come at the perfect time to help us grow into these next versions of ourselves that we kind of need to grow into. And in the moment, it feels like so much and maybe so challenging and so overwhelming, but it's actually the best thing that could always happen, because they kind of like bring us on that path. I know you heard when we've met first time that your children are like a big part of why you're doing now what you're doing. And for me, that's true as well. So I think it's really beautiful that we don't need to like choose kids or career. Maybe we don't have it at the same time, but one can emerge out of the other, which is like, it's really just very beautiful how everything plays together.
I love that you talked about embodied authenticity and you talked about all those threads that we hold as mothers. And I think when we allow ourselves to be human within motherhood, motherhood becomes so much easier. And for me, what is so important is really sharing from an authentic place, because I think, you know, with social media and with this obsession of women trying to present an image to the world that they have it all together, what we've done is we've actually isolated ourselves, because the truth is nobody's got it all together. And really, we don't actually, like, if we're really honest with ourselves, like if I'm honest with myself, I don't want to hold it all by myself. Like, I don't want to do it all by myself. The feminist movement, I think, has swung so far the other way that we've now sold the next generation this story that we actually don't need anyone, that we can do it all. And certainly there are women that do, but at the expense of what? The expense of our nervous system capacity, our health, you know, having to put a face out there to the world to pretend really that we've got it all together, when, you know, really, I think what a lot of us would prefer is to be able to melt into our lives and melt into true support, whatever that looks like for us, whether it's a community, our extended families, our partners, whatever that is, but to really to do this life in partnership. And motherhood, it dismantles all of that, right? It really, it calls us into greater authenticity, greater truth, greater depth. And we can either resist it and try to stay, you know, try to juggle it along with what we think we should be in the world, or we can open up to it. And it's when we open up to it that it all gets to exist, and we get to move and flow through all the different versions of ourselves without having to perform in any of those places.
Yeah. Yes. I totally agree. And while you spoke, I thought about like my upbringing journey, because my mother raised me kind of alone. And I formed exactly the picture that you've just touched on. This, like, we need to, as women, we need to like have it figured out alone, because if there's no man, then we kind of have to have it all together, and we have to like have the control and everything. Not because my mother particularly told me it kind of that way in exactly that statement, but it was what I was observing. So we did everything alone, and that worked, but always to the expense, of course, of like my mother being like exhausted often, of course, because juggling raising a kid and a job and trying to like find yourself and your, you know, ways to live and friendships, everything together, it's a lot. And that, for me, it formed this picture of I can do it all alone and I need to. And only when I met my husband, he was like, but I'm here to support you. Like, why are you like exhausting yourself? I'm here for you. And for me, it took a long time until I accepted that, without having in my back like this I'm back in the 50s kind of scenario, because he didn't want to suppress me, but he also wanted to support me. So it kind of like brings back, I think, what you've just touched on, that we can have this fluidity of things, and that having one doesn't mean we can't have the other, because it's like kind of, there's always this flow. So we can be supported by people, and it doesn't have to be a male partner for a female. It can be a community. It can be a group of friends. It can be everything. It doesn't actually matter who and how many people it is, but it's like having the help and being open enough to get supported. That is, I think, something that we really should, if we go into the should embrace as women, especially when we become mothers, and not this like self-dependent, I can do it all alone, because that is to the expense of our health, mentally or physically or both. And therefore, and that's what I would love to like ask you, because I think like if we go into this self-dependency or hyper-independency, especially when we're having kids, what are we telling them? What do they see from us? You know, the role that they perceive from us as mothers, if we try to always have it all together, and have all the answers and always like be in control of everything. Now, in hindsight, I would say that's not a picture that I want my son to like have of me. That's not what I want him to remember or to learn from me, but more that I'm open to figuring it out, and I'm open to being like not perfect right now, or being frustrated and telling him that I have no idea what to do right now, because that is the authentic expression. And so, yeah, I would love to have your thoughts on this, like being the perfect, parent in comparison to being really fully authentic, what that does on the kids.
I think that's such a powerful perspective to hold. And really, you talked about openness. It really is being open to receiving is ultimately what a lot of women struggle with.
Yeah.
It's trusting that another person can hold them. And it does, and like you said, it doesn't have to be a partner. I mean, your support can look like anything. Sometimes your support is paid support, whether you're placing them in a daycare or you have them, let's say, in a church group, or whatever the case may be, whatever your community is. But it's really this, we've moved away, at least in North America, I can say we've moved away from the community aspect of what it takes to raise children. And we are really promoting this concept of ultra independence and motherhood simply being another checkbox on the way to building the big career or building the big business and making the money and being successful. And what that does is it creates silos for women that women are in, and they feel so alone. And I mean, I speak from this experience because when I became a mom, I had a thriving career as an educator. I was in a fairly high position in the Ministry of Education. I left my position to have my children, and the idea was that I was going to be home and then I was going to go back to work, and then life had different plans for me. And when I chose to stay home with my children, I did so still from a place of, I've got this all together. I don't need anybody's help, because none of the women around me, whether they were my age or older, had modeled that level of support. What they were speaking about was how they could handle it all. They were really rooted in the, this is just how motherhood is. Motherhood is hard. You've got to juggle it all. It's just the reality of it all. So I kept measuring myself up against these women, thinking, why is it that I don't have it together? Why is it that I can't seem to get a handle on this? Like, I've got to just try harder. I've got to double down. And what ended up happening was I basically worked myself into a major health crisis. And and like my body basically gave out on me, and I was in full adrenal burnout, and I had no choice but to stop and look and say, okay, this is not working and I need to do it differently, because the way I've been doing it, the way that's been modeled to me, the way that's being promoted is not the way that works for me. And so it really was a journey of having to come into my humanness, I would say, and acknowledge, what I needed, and learning to ask for help and learning to ask for support. And it's still an ongoing process because the programming runs deep, and I catch myself sometimes moving into that, I've got it, I can do it, I don't need any help. And then it really, the growth is stopping myself and then saying, okay, this is an old story and you do need help and it's okay to ask for it. And so really reprogramming those neurons and those patterns and creating new patterns. And so what I'm hoping that my kids are seeing in all of this is that being human means asking for support. Being human means admitting that we are not perfect, that we will make mistakes, that we will need people to support us along the way. And I'm hoping that in seeing that, then when they grow up, they won't grow up with this idea of I have to do it all by myself.
Mm-hmm.
They'll have less hesitancy to say to someone, you know what, I need some support with this. I can't do it all by myself. And they won't see that as them being less or them being not enough, right? Which is what a lot of women are afraid of admitting that, because then they've tied performance to worthiness and tied, external validation to their enoughness. And so it's really this beautiful return home to, of course, I'm whole, and of course, I'm worthy, and of course, I'm enough. And nothing that I do determines that. I just am. And so moving from that place, right, is so liberating.
Yeah. So profound, to have this realization of I am worthy by just being, and asking for help doesn't mean I fail, quote unquote. On the contrary, it's kind of a sign of growth, as you said, to like realize, okay, cannot do it enough, or the price is too high for it, so I'm asking for help. It's actually a good thing. And I think it's a wonderful thing to mirror that to our children, that it's totally fine to ask for help, to ask for support, to say like, well, that hasn't worked. Let's try something else. Let's try another way. Let's lean for support to another person or a community or the church or whatever you believe in. It doesn't even matter what it is, but it's like this, like, I don't have to be in this like isolated box and run everything from here, but I can like open the lid of the box and see what can assist me here. And that's the beauty, I think, of like authenticity. And what I want to touch on or in regards to this is what you said, because I think that's like really crucial point, especially for mothers, is this looking around like at other mothers and seeing like that they have, or thinking that they have it all together, because almost nobody, I would still say, really authentically shares about how they feel. Maybe because there's like, oh, I can't say that, otherwise I'm a bad mother, or otherwise I would admit that I have failed, or people wouldn't, think I'm professional enough, or whatever it is that runs in the back of our minds. But the moment that we like put on this mask of everything is perfect and I have it all together, we are passively telling other mothers that it's not okay to talk about it. It's like we're not opening that door, because like if everyone around you, just for an example, would have said like, okay, well, it's hard, I have no idea, can you support me? Then you would maybe not have even formed that thought of you need to have it all together, because you would have seen from the authentic standpoint of the other moms around you that sometimes it is a mess and sometimes it's beautiful and sometimes it's hard to have it all at the same time. And I think that's the most big gift that we can gift ourselves as well as others, is to really fully be authentic and be courageous enough to say that things are working not as planned, or that we need support in there, because this is like opening the doors for everyone else who sees you from afar or from very near to say like, okay, if she's vulnerable and she's open and she's authentic, I maybe have the courage to be that too. And then it's kind of like the ripple effect is really big the moment we allow ourselves to do so. So I think that is like ultimately the community that I would love to see more of, or that is actually supporting ourselves, because then we don't have to put on these masks. We don't have to put on the facade of saying like, oh, well, that's just like the first 5 hard years and then I can get back to my normal life, or whatever is present right now in our society. But we really say like, okay, it's not easy, but I enjoy it. And maybe I don't need to even go back as soon into my old job just because it has been societally approved and kind of like forced to get back in there as fast as possible. But maybe it's totally fine that I don't want to. And it's actually needed for me to stay there longer, not because I failed or because my kids are special or different or whatever, but because I feel it's the right thing right now without, needing to explain things.
Yeah, I think truly like it's this mentality that, everybody else must have it together. And so I must be the problem that is keeping us, like I said, siloed. And then it's this like you were saying, this fear almost of being real with one another. And then being judged by other women for, saying, sometimes I actually don't enjoy being with my children, and like just owning that truth, as well as saying there are times that I absolutely love it, right? And so allowing it all to exist and then finding the courage and the bravery to express that allows us to move out of separation and back into connection. And ultimately, I mean, I'd love to hear what it's like in Europe, but I can say that in North America, while there are all kinds of moms groups and programs you can take your kids to and all of these things, unless you have that established connection with another woman, it is very isolating, because the idea is that you show up and there is a performative aspect. It is I've got it all together. And, it feels so, you almost feel like you're like, am I the only person going through this?
Yeah.
And then when you add, like for me with my second child, I had postpartum depression and anxiety. And because I did not have a huge support system, and the women that I knew who were mothers before me did not share authentically, likely out of fear that they would be judged, I basically dealt with it on my own. Actually, I didn't deal with it. It was undiagnosed for 2 years, and I literally thought I was losing my mind. And I had nobody I didn't feel like I could turn to anyone and say, I'm really, really struggling here. I'm really having a hard time. And because no one else had shared their struggles. And so I felt like, well, you're just complaining. Like, suck it up. Like, just deal with it. This is life. Like, you have two really young kids. Other people have bigger families. They manage it. It's just how it is, right? And so I was very hard on myself. And I think had I had like a community where I felt I could show up in my truth and really be real about what I was feeling, I wonder like what would have come of that level of support for my experience as a mother.
What a big question, isn't it? Because like maybe the postpartum depression wouldn't have even been one, or maybe it would have been like much less intensive if you would have had support, authentic, like, people who are authentic in their journey. I feel like big part of all the mental, emotional, or physical struggles that we have present in our own lives and society in general is due to this like feeling so lonely in the struggles that we've go through. And I think like if there's more openness and people would just would just be, really raw and authentic in their own journey and how they just feel right now and what they make out of it, there would be much less of these, I don't know how to say, but much less of these issues that we have, because we would felt held and supported and seen and heard, and we can kind of solve the problems, quote unquote, that we feel are present in our individual lives as a community. So it's not everything on your shoulder anymore. If you have the group of other women, for example, to share with, and to say, like, for me, totally hard. I was hugging my kid and I wasn't feeling anything, or whatever came up, without like feeling I'm going to be judged. Something is wrong with me. I cannot phrase that. And yeah, I like to answer your question. In Europe, I think it's kind of the same. So there's a lot of performance. I feel mothers, I totally isolated myself because I couldn't bond with the way other mothers did it. They were already, after like week 4 or whatever, going to these baby courses and kind of like perform there in a way of like telling each other on how hard it is and what their kids already could do or couldn't do. And for me, it was always competition thing. And that felt really totally not resonating with me. So I just didn't go there. And by choice, isolated myself because I didn't want to go into the small talk and performance thing. And so I can totally relate on the loneliness. And what I know from other friends or other women in my life, a lot of them feel really lonely, and a lot of them feel like behind the curtain, it's a complete different experience than what they show. But most of them are still doing what everyone else does, going to like baby cafes or going to this group and that group. And very often, sometimes with the need and sometimes not, like giving their kids, quote unquote, away to daycare really early, which my explanation for that is because it's hard for them to deal with everything that comes up. And so very often it's like the normal way and also like the easier way to just give your kids away very long. So here it's quite common, if you have enough money, to give your kid into childcare from 7 to 6 in the evening and then go full time to work really quite soon. In France, it's much more extreme still. But even here, it's breaking my heart how many people have children and then like they give them away at the earliest and for the longest time possible. Where I think like, why are you even having kids when you don't hold the capacity for them to be in your space? And not to judge when you need it. That's not what I mean. But I feel like the amount of people I see living that way, it kind of raises a question in me. Like, why do we have these kids? Is this just part of the performance? You said it before with the checkbox thing. I feel that here too. It's like you have to have a career, then you have the kid, and then you need to have the house, and then you need to have the dog, and then you have the career again. But it's like kind of, it needs to be in that order. Otherwise, something's wrong. And so it's more a checkbox than it is like, I want to really spend time with this little human and learn from it and kind of nourish it the best I can. So that's what I hear.
That's interesting because I think part of it is also that motherhood is not valued in the same way that career is, right? And I know there are a few people out there that are really working to try to change that. I'm trying to remember the name. There's a woman, she runs an account called Motherhood Untitled, I believe, on Instagram, Neha Roosh, and she just published a book called The Power Pause. And it's really this reworking of our understanding of what it means to be home with our children. Mm-hmm. And I think the way it's been positioned for women is that, okay, you work, you take your maternity leave, and then once that's done, you go back to your career. Yeah. But I know part of her work is really helping women to see the value in what motherhood is calling them into and seeing that as also a powerful part of their experience, and that the skill set that they are learning while they are fully immersed in motherhood is not like a loss of time. Yeah. A lot of women operate from that lack mentality because of the way it's been set up societally. This idea that you don't want to be away from the workplace for too long, otherwise you will miss out on opportunity. Your skills will become, not as sharp. You'll lose out. And so motherhood is positioned as this pause that women take almost sacrificially. And then the feminist movement adds in that extra layer of, well, you don't have to be away from the workplace for that long. You can just, you can do what you need to do. It's like that. There's a song by a famous artist who says, we have the children and then we get back to business, right? And it's this idea of like, okay, you do the thing, but then the most important thing is your career, is the work outside the home. And I think the conversation needs to shift to what happens when we as women value motherhood as much as we do our careers, and we choose to redefine the conversation around success. And we see like the success of raising the next generation as being the most important thing we do. Now, having said that, what I can say personally is that when I was struggling with my postpartum depression and anxiety, likely the greatest gift I could have given myself and my children is to place them in a daycare program, even for a part of the day, because I was not at the capacity to be able to care for them in the way that I needed to. And I stopped myself from doing that because I felt guilty, because I was home, quote unquote home. And so I should be able to manage my toddler and my newborn by myself. And I also had people in my life who very clearly expressed that women who put their children in daycare were selfish. Mm-hmm. And so I internalized that message. And what that did was it created like a worse situation for me. And now what I will say to any young mother, especially a mother who has more than one child that she's juggling, is I will say to her, whatever support you need during the day, especially if you don't have like that close-knit community, like a family member, a sister, a mother, whatever the case may be, who is able to support you, take it. Because it's better if your child has you at your fullest, like if you're able to give from a resourced place. And if that means that for 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day, your child is with someone else who is caring for them so that you can tend to yourself and replenish yourself, that's better than you deciding, I can't do that because that makes me selfish. And then your child gets a version of you that you never really wanted to give them,
Yeah. I totally agree on that, even with what I've said before, because I think it's the intention you have behind it. If it's for the child can only be as happy and healthy as the mother is. So if you need time for yourself to recharge, that shouldn't be labeled as selfish, and it shouldn't make you feel uncomfortable or, I don't know, worrying about what other people think. It should be a normal part of our lives. But then again, like, if you have the capacity, then care for your children in the moment you can. So I think it can be really both, and it depends on what we need as mothers and what we see the children need the most, because all of us are different. So some children need more time with others, some less. Some mothers need more time for themselves, some less. And there's no right or wrong. I think what we really need is to, again, circling back to the authenticity, to say like, I need that right now, and I don't have to explain why and how. It's just, this is what I feel is the most important thing right now for the good of all of us here in this family dynamic. And then that's what we do for now. And it can shift fast or not so fast. And even that is like, I think the moment we, again, come to this fluidity, instead of like saying, that's how it is and only that's the right way, or that's what I need to stick to for until whatever they go to school or they come out of school or whatever time frame we set ourselves. I think the moment we allow to see what is necessary right now so that everyone can be their happiest and recharge the best, that's the way we should go. And it's kind of like, I was laughing when you said that you had like the feeling of it's not okay that you give your children to daycare, because it's both, isn't it? We get from society that you need to give them to daycare so that you can work again and like have your quote unquote normal life again. But then again, if we do, we feel kind of bad for that too, because it's not okay to not be with your kids. So it's kind of like, is there anything like how can we make it right, quote unquote? Because everything you do is kind of perceived as not okay from one part or the other of society. And that again is, we could fall into victimhood for that, or we can say like, okay, well, I just do what is best for me right now, and everything else doesn't matter because I'm the only one, together with my family and my partner, who is raising my children. So I'm the one who needs to decide what is good for me in that moment. And the moment we would have more authentic support or even authentic role models from other families, other women from society, I think that would make it much more easy to do so, and much less harshness on ourselves. I think that is something that I really dream about. Because like you said something also before about not needing to have it all together in that moment. And I think this, like, you can be that in this moment and another part of you just a few days later, and both is okay. I think it's important that we really give ourselves the grace and have the courage to be so, because that is what ultimately makes us happy, and that is also what is for our children is so valuable to see that, oh, she changes, and she changes with me, and maybe even a part like through me, because children nudge ourselves into the next step. And yeah, what came to my mind as well as a last point is, I had a similar conversation with another mother recently, and she said, like, if I would pay you for taking care of my children during the day while I would work, that would mean you work and you would be valued for that work. But you would do the same job that I just do for no money, because it's my job, because I'm a mother. And we laughed about like how crazy everything is, because if I do her job for her, then that's like labeled as valuable work. But if she does the same job for her kids, then it's, you're just a homestaying mother. It's
Exactly.
actually, if you think about it, it's just crazy. But that's like the limiting beliefs that we so often have without being able to reflect on them. It's necessary to have these conversations more and more so that women see like, okay, there's actually nothing to it, because I'm doing a really, really important job here.
And that's what it is. And I think that ultimately to redefine motherhood has to come from within, like in terms of it's the mothers that will redefine it for society. So it's not us waiting for some external, like, force or government body or group of people to say, yes, mothers are valuable. It's for mothers to decide the work that I am doing here as a mother is incredibly valuable. And that's such a powerful point that you made. It's true. If we were to pay another mother to care for our children, it would be seen as this is her job.
Yeah.
But we don't value that same thing when we're doing it. We see it as, oh, I'm taking a pause from my real, quote unquote, real job, my real career. This is just a break. And as long as we feel that way about it, then it's energetics, right? It's, if we believe it's just, oh, it's a break, it's not serious work, it's just us staying home with our kids, then it will not be valued by other people. But the moment we anchor into the power of what we're doing, as we are raising the next generation of humans, we are responsible for creating this next group of people who will one day lead us, then our work becomes important and valuable, and we learn to advocate for what we need. And one of the things that you said that was so powerful was this idea of ultimately it comes back to us. The authenticity is, what do I need? Right? And it's this willingness to look within instead of without, and to say, I need this now, recognizing that I have the power to say, I won't need it in the future, and that it can change and morph and grow based on me and how I grow and change and expand. Like, The level of support that I needed when I was fully in my postpartum depression and anxiety is not the level of support that I need now, because I have moved through a 6-year wellness journey. And so I'm now at a point where I can recognize the warning signs. I can see where I try, like I fall into an old pattern, and I know where that's going to lead me. And so now what I need is different. You know what I mean? And it's really learning as women to stop looking outside of ourselves and pulling our power back into ourselves. And this is ultimately what we're being invited into. This is embodiment. This is personal power. This is a new kind of leadership, because as women, a lot of us are raised as young girls to always look outside of ourselves, to, pay attention to, okay, does this make my parent happy? Am I being a quote unquote good girl? Do I receive accolades for being polite and acquiescing and always people pleasing and all of those things? And so this is a lot of what I help women undo, is all of this programming where we create our lives based on what we feel is going to be validated externally, what we feel people think we should be doing. And so many of us are, sometimes in lives, in careers, in jobs, stuck in places because, well, if I leave that, or if I choose to stay home with my children, or if I choose something different, what will everybody think? What will my parents say? What will my family say? Right? And that holds us in lives that are not actual expressions of who we are. And so then we spend all of our time and energy and effort trying to pretend to be something and uphold structures that we are not actually wanting to uphold anymore.
Yes.
And there's so much liberation in saying, is this what I actually want? And then giving ourselves permission to say, no, it's not. Or yes, it is. And owning that, right? Like truly owning it as like, this is what's right for me. It doesn't have to make sense to anybody else. Yeah. It only has to make sense to me and my family, like you were saying, yeah. Right? Me, my family, my kids, and how I see myself wanting to raise them, wanting to be in this world.
True. Thank you so much. I feel like I would love to ask you 1,000 more questions, but I feel like this is just such a beautiful statement that I also feel called to say, like, okay, that's like the statement for today, because this is perfectly phrased. I thank you so much. Redefining motherhood is, wow, it's I feel it's like such a big topic that almost nobody talks about, which is kind of crazy, because everything that you just said, like the coming back to our own authenticity and the valuing of our own individual pulse from our soul, that's not only quote unquote making our lives with our children and ourselves better, but that's like how we change society in general. Just imagine if everybody would look within instead of without, like what would happen? So this conversation is beyond parenting. It's maybe just a drop that then ripples out into the society in general. And therefore, I think it needed to be talked about so much more. And so many women, I just imagine, like, I always love to imagine what happens when the collectives has an embodied awareness of things like this. How different would our lives be? How different would our society be if women would be open and empowered within themselves, and then also like lead their family that way? We would live in a whole different world. And that kind of gives me shivers, because it's actually, we often think we in our little lives are so small, we cannot change anything in the collective, but we can do change so much. So there's so much potential in here. That's kind of essentially what I'm trying to say. And that's really beautiful, because each and every one of us, if we have kids or not, you can do that with your nephews or nieces or whatever. It doesn't even matter. But we can have this like inward validation each and every one of us can.
Yeah, and it really, that's what it is. It's a reclamation of really who women were in the past. And I mean, women were wisdom keepers. Women were the ones that, this whole concept of like women in community is not new. And thankfully there are still cultures, like I think of the South American culture where they hold the mother, right, in her first year and beyond. Even the Asian culture, same thing. And it's this idea of like really recognizing the power that we hold as women to create the societies that we want to see. And that's what we're being called into, is really called to remember the power we have within, to stop looking outside for the change to come, and to really be the leaders in our families, in our lives, in our communities, to begin to create the circumstances that allow us to thrive. Because when a woman thrives, her family thrives, her children thrive, her community thrives, right? And so it's really reclaiming our understanding of the place that we hold in society. There's a sacredness to the feminine that has been forgotten. And when women remember that, then everything shifts in terms of how they move through their lives.
Oh, the internet is lacking. Oh no, I've lost you in the last sentences. Can you hear me
Can you
again?
hear me now? Yes, I can.
Yes, I
Can you
can.
hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, where was I? Do you want me to repeat myself, or?
Yeah, I was just thinking when it really cut off, you talked about the power that we hold when we look in, and then it kind of went blurry. So I think I've missed half a minute.
Okay, so it's really what it is it's a reclamation of the power that we hold within. And it's a remembering of the sacredness of the sacredness of the feminine as being at the heart of society. And really this placing of the feminine in a state of, I would say, sorry, I'm trying to think of the word, really valuing the contributions that the feminine can make to the future of society. And when we can see that, then we determine how we show up in motherhood, in our lives, in our partnerships, in our families, right? And then we get to decide what that looks like. That's the authenticity. It's a reclaiming of our power and a remembering of what we hold within. And what happens when the feminine feels supported and seen and held and loved is that she opens up to be able to give from her heart. And she creates from this heart frequency, from this heart-led leadership. And then she begins to create, she magnetizes community and all of those things. And so really as women, it's about moving out of this ultra masculine ideal, trying to do it the way, the man has done it, and really owning what it is that we bring, like our uniqueness. And this comes into play in motherhood, because it's only when we own that, like that we are the mothers, we are the ones that really nurture and raise the next generation, then that work is seen as valuable, right? And really worth our time, our effort, and not as just like, it's just for a short time and everything else is more important.
Yeah, I agree. I feel we're moving slowly, but we're moving into that direction, and that is really beautiful to see. So I thank you so much for being here, for sharing all of your wisdom. I hope that I can invite you for part 2, because I have so many other questions that I would love to discuss with you that are not just fitting into one episode.
Love that. I'd absolutely love to have another
We
conversation
do
with
that.
you.
There are so many topics that come to my mind.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here today and to be part of this conversation. I absolutely loved it.
Me as well. And I thank you so much for being so open. this is really empowering to myself and also to everyone I think of who could potentially listen. So I thank you so much for that. And we speak very, very soon, I am sure.
We will.